Good evening, newbies, and welcome to Nonprofits Empowering Worlds. If you are thinking about starting a nonprofit, or if you are a new nonprofit founder, this episode is for you. Tonight, we're going to be covering the most frequently asked questions that I have received as a nonprofit strategist. We're also going to be answering some questions that you don't know you need to ask about starting a nonprofit. So grab your notebooks because I'm going to be covering a wealth of information. My name is Bridgett Scarborough, and I am your host. I am also the founder of 501c3 My Org, and I am a nonprofit strategist. I'm also part of a larger network of female podcasts called The Female Solution. And The Female Solution would like to give you a warm welcome this evening.
Women have the power to transform this world. We can end crime and violence if we all agree to do one thing: share. Let's share our wisdom, share our time, share our talents, share our finances, but most of all, let's share our love. This is the Female Solution.
Leaders of Nonprofits Empowering Worlds. Let's go.
But the vision that God gave me, I felt that it was time for me to step out and work on the vision that God gave me.
We need look no further. We have a unique voice. We have a unique talent pool.
Hi, newbies. Thank you for joining me this evening. As I stated earlier, today we're going to be talking about the most frequently asked questions that I have gotten as a nonprofit strategist from people who are thinking about starting a nonprofit, as well as new founders who have just started a nonprofit. Now, if you're new to this channel or this podcast, then let me explain what we're all about. Normally, I have nonprofit founders as guests on my show. So every episode, I interview someone who has started a nonprofit from the ground up. Okay, someone who has taken an idea from inception. Taking an idea and brought it to fruition. So on this podcast, we want to highlight those unsung heroes, people who are out here making a difference in the lives of old people, young people, the unhoused, the mentally ill, those people who are really making an impact in people's lives and changing the trajectory of communities. So that's what we do here on this show. But once in a great while, I would like to take a break from that and do a coaching session, right? We learn from the interviews, but we also learn from people such as myself who have experience with a wide variety of founders and their challenges and how they were able to overcome those challenges, and and some of the mistakes that a lot of people make. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to go through some of the frequently asked questions that people have about starting a nonprofit, but I'm also going to touch upon some of those questions that you don't know you need to ask. And that's just from my experience of working with, again, so many people and seeing how a small misstep or a small misunderstanding or a small gap in knowledge can lead to challenges down the road that you may not want to deal with. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So the first question, I'm going to start off with some of the questions that you may not know that you want to ask. Okay. Let's see here. What is a nonprofit? So you might be thinking, that's a very elementary question, right? I know what a nonprofit is. A lot of people think they know what a nonprofit is. However, in my experience, people don't exactly know what a nonprofit is for real, okay? So let's talk about what a nonprofit is. A nonprofit is a corporation. A nonprofit is a corporation. Now, how many of you have ever thought about a nonprofit being a corporation? Because most of the time, when we talk about nonprofits, we don't use the term corporation. When you think of a corporation, what do you think about? I see there's a few people that's viewing this right now. Drop a comment and let me know, when you think about a corporation, what comes to mind when you hear that word corporation? I'll give you a moment. But most people don't associate nonprofits with corporations because we tend to use the term organization. Oh, she has a nonprofit organization. Or there's an organization that helped me to enroll in some type of benefit. So we don't typically use the term corporation, we use organization. But organization is a very generic term. It's not a legal term. When you start a nonprofit and you apply with your state to become a nonprofit, you are actually starting a corporation. When you fill out the paperwork, it asks you, do you want to start a for-profit corporation or would you like to start a nonprofit corporation? But either one is still a corporation. So I know when I think about a corporation, I think about a business. And so that is what we should be thinking about. That is how we should be thinking about our nonprofit. It is a business. The only difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit is that the reason why you start a nonprofit versus a for-profit is for some type of benefit to the public that is not profit-based. So it doesn't mean that you can't make a profit or that the nonprofit can't make a profit. It just means that your primary purpose is not to make money. So when you start a nonprofit corporation, and I will use that word going forward, if I can remember, through this podcast, because I think it's important for us to ingrain that in our minds. although when I talk about nonprofits on a day-to-day basis, I don't usually use the term nonprofit corporation. And the only reason I don't is because I know that most people don't use that term. And it might confuse people. So I use the term that I know most people are familiar with, which is just nonprofit or organization. I don't typically use charity because I see that as something a little bit different. But those are the two terms that I would use. But for the purposes of this podcast, I would like to ingrain this idea in your head that a nonprofit is a corporation, which means it is a business, and it can pretty much do everything that other businesses can do. It's just that your focus is some type of benefit to the public. So you are organized for the purpose of providing some type of benefit to the public and not to make a profit. That is the only difference, hence the term nonprofit corporation. Okay. I just found out that the owners of my building that I live in is a nonprofit. I didn't know that. I've been here for 5 years in this building, and I just found out that the owners are a nonprofit, the owner of the building that I live in. So nonprofits can engage in all types of business as long as the primary activities and focus is to further this particular cause that they've been organized for. But you can have business ventures with your nonprofit. You can own property, as demonstrated with the building that I live in. You can sell products. You can sell services. Everything doesn't have to be free. So you can conduct yourself just like any other corporation. Now, when you start your nonprofit, then you fill out a form called Articles of Incorporation. Depending on the state that you live in, it could be called, here in Illinois, where I live, it's called Articles of Incorporation. However, I used to be on the board of a nonprofit in Wisconsin, and what they call their certificates is non-stock corporation. So they use the term non-stock corporation. So here we use Articles of Incorporation. There they use the term non-stock corporation. In Texas, they use Certificate of Formation, but they still consider it a non-stock corporation. So you may hear that term too. You very rarely on legal documents hear the word organization. You always hear corporation, nonprofit corporation or non-stock corporation. Non-stock meaning you don't have any stockholders. Okay. There's no one financially vested in this corporation. Now, you might think, why is she talking about this so much? Because people forget. People forget. And people sometimes didn't know in the first place. You may have had someone else fill out your incorporation documents. This happens quite often. And people, sometimes founders have other people to do their incorporation paperwork. They have people do their 501c3 paperwork, which we're going to get to in a minute. But so they don't completely have a good handle on what their organizing document states, or even what the real definition of a nonprofit is, right? So I know this because I'll give you an example. Sometimes when I take on a new client, I will ask them, hey, can you give me your articles of incorporation? So that I can review it to make sure it has everything that has to be in there. And sometimes, instead of sending me the articles of incorporation, they send me their bylaws. Okay. So yes, bylaws are broken down by articles. So I can see people getting that confused. Bylaws have articles. Your articles of incorporation have articles, but these are two separate documents. And it just shows that sometimes people get confused. Okay. If a funder asks you for for your incorporation documents, and you send them your bylaws, it's not going to look very good. It's not going to be a good reflection on you as a leader. Okay. So you want to pay attention to your organizing documents and what it states. Now, the next thing and we're going to talk about what your articles of incorporation needs to state a little bit later. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question, which is, what is a 501c3? Okay, what is a 501c3? So as a consultant, as a nonprofit strategist, I would say almost very, very close to 100% of the new clients that I get that do not have a nonprofit already, they are interested in getting a 501c3. And I would say almost 100% of these individuals that are interested in getting a 501c3 don't really have a good understanding of what a 501c3 is. So what they know, and what most people know, is I need a 501c3 in order to get funding. I need a 501c3 in order to get funding. That's the extent of what they know. Well, the reason you need that is true. If you're looking for funding and you're planning on writing grants in order to fund a portion, at least, of your nonprofit's expenses, then yes, you definitely should be considering getting a 501c3, because a 501c3 will definitely open that door for you. However, the 501c3, the definition of a 501c3 is not that it can get you funding. Okay. What a 501c3 is that it is a tax exempt status. And again, this is a question that a lot of people don't know they need to ask. What is a 501c3? I know I want it, but what actually is it? Okay. So a 501c3 is a tax designation that makes your nonprofit tax exempt. What this means is that the money that you bring into the organization, to the corporation, okay, even I say organization a lot because that's what I normally say, but for this podcast, we want to say corporation. Put in the comments, corporation. We want the 501c3 allows you to bring in revenue to your corporation and not have to pay taxes. Okay. You do not, any other business, if you are a for-profit corporation, then whatever revenue your corporation makes, then you have to pay taxes on that. For instance, my business, 501c3 My Org, is a for-profit business. And a lot of people think that it's a nonprofit because of the title of my business, 501c3 My Org. But no, I am not a nonprofit corporation. I am a for-profit corporation. 501c3 My Org is the name because people come to me and say, help me get a 501c3. And so that is kind of the basis of my business, is to help people to start their nonprofits and to obtain their 501c3 and get grant ready. So that's why I call myself 501c3 My Org, or call my business 501c3 My Org. But I am not a nonprofit. I am a for-profit business. And I have to pay taxes. Heck up out of Illinois soon. Because they tax the heck out of me. But I digress. When you have a 501c3, you are tax exempt. So the reason why that allows you to get grants is because also whoever donates to your organization, whether it be an individual or a funder, they also get a tax benefit for donating money to your organization. So it is like a win-win situation. You are able to bring in revenue to support your cause without having to pay taxes. And the donor also gets a tax benefit, which is why everyone wants you to have the 501c3 in order to give you money. So it's not just this, oh, the 501c3 is designed for you to get funding, or that's the purpose of the 501c3, or that's the definition of the 501c3 is that it allows you to get funding. It is a tax exempt status, which then allows you to get more funding because it's a tax benefit. Okay, so I'm just laying the groundwork here because these two things are very important to know going into starting your nonprofit journey. Because if you look at your nonprofit as a corporation, you act differently, right? Because you're viewing it as a business. You're still, you need to handle this corporation like a business. And you, as the founder or the leader of the nonprofit, you need to conduct yourself as if you are running a business. So the mindset is different. It also allows you to not have so many limitations, like, oh, everything has to be free. Everything has to, I can't make a lot of money, or the corporation can't make a lot of money. We're a nonprofit. I think there's a mindset that switches there when you know that it's a corporation, and then you understand why funders want you to have the 501c3. Okay. And understand that the incorporation comes from the states and the 501c3 comes from the feds, the IRS. This is another thing that you have to make sure you keep separate because they both have their own set of requirements for you to maintain compliance. And this is something that also gets a little convoluted down the line if you're not paying attention. So sometimes people get in trouble because they don't know the things that they need to do to maintain state compliance, and they don't know the things that they need to do to maintain IRS compliance, or they may be focusing on one and not the other. So sometimes you're more aware of the state and you neglect the IRS, and vice versa. And sometimes you get them confused. So you make a report to the state and you think you did it to the IRS. And and you're like, oh, I thought that I was doing what I was supposed to do with the IRS. No, that was the state. So these are things that you have to learn very early on as a leader, because a lot of times people have other people starting their nonprofits filling out the application for the 501c3 for them. Oh, I got my lawyer to incorporate me. I got my accountant to, my accountant's handling all of my, filings. And they don't know enough to oversee these people to make sure they're doing it correctly. You will be surprised how many lawyers fill out the incorporation documents wrong. And so we're coming up to a break soon, but we are going to get to what needs to be in those incorporation documents, because one of the things that is required, there are certain things that's required for you to obtain your 501c3. And one of those things is there's certain language that has to be in your incorporation documents. So before you even incorporate, you have to know, I'm going to eventually go for a 501c3, and this certain language needs to be in my incorporation documents so that I can qualify for the 501c3. And you will be amazed at how many times people have had lawyers or quote unquote experienced board members to fill out their paperwork, and they did it wrong. And it definitely comes back to haunt them later on. So these are the two questions that people don't always ask, but they should be asking. What is a nonprofit? What is a 501c3? I hope I answered those two, but I do have more to say as we get into the frequently asked questions that people actually do ask. But before we get into that, and I dropped those gems because there's some gems coming, please have your notebooks ready, because I will be giving you some tips that's very, very valuable. And you definitely want to hear it if you're thinking about starting a nonprofit, or if you are thinking, or if you just started a nonprofit, or even if you've been in existence for a while. This could be a good reminder or prompt you to go back and check it and look at your paperwork, okay? Before you have to answer to the feds and you don't know the answers, okay? We want to stay on top of our game, but we're going to take a quick break. And we will be right back. Have you ever felt called to start a nonprofit but had no idea where to begin? Or maybe you're already pouring your own time, energy, and money into a cause you care deeply about, but you know you could make a bigger impact with the right support. Imagine having a team behind you. Imagine being able to secure funding. Imagine scaling your mission so you can reach more people and change more lives. That's exactly what this training is designed to help you do. We've taken the entire process of launching a nonprofit and broken it down into 7 simple steps, including how to obtain your 501c3 status, how to use it effectively, and how to stay in compliance so your organization continues to thrive. You will walk away organized, confident, and most importantly, grant ready. Register now at 501c3startuptraining.eventbrite.com. That's 501c3 startuptraining.eventbrite.com.
Soulful Chicago Black History Book Fair.
Hey family, this is Charles Humphrey of MCH Publishing, and I'm here with Ashada, and we at the Soulful Chicago Book what?
This is the Soulful Chicago Black History Book Fair, slamming.
We getting down in Hyde Park. Just run it down, my sister. Just tell us, for the people, a little bit about what we're doing here today and why.
You know, this is the Soulful Chicago Black History Book Fair, and this month is very important. I feel like we don't give it the type of recognition that it needs, but beyond that, I do all things literary, and we have so many ancestors that have taken a tradition of writing and done great things. Well, we have those of us that are carrying on that tradition, and nobody knows about them until now. So the Soulful Chicago Black History Book Fair is allowing us to tell our stories according to ourselves for our own benefit. And it's just beautiful. I mean, you could have been here today if you wasn't here, but if you were, it's been amazing. People came in consistently, children, and we have children's authors, we have nonfiction authors, we have fiction authors. This is really good. And it's about taking our own power in our own hands and doing what we do on the literary tip, though.
Right.
I got to work, but I can't help it. Everything going to school. Now I just about bring my African shit like this. Bring in the African shit.
So that was the Soulful Chicago Book Fair, which is coming up February 15th. If you are in the Chicago area, please make sure you are there. It is a wonderful time. You have Black authors from Chicago, as well as the surrounding Midwest in general, but mostly Black authors from Chicago. You're able to purchase books, get signed copies, talk to the author. It's family friendly. There's entertainment. I mean, you just have to be there. You know, there's nothing like it. We need to show up and show out February 15th. I want to see you there. I want to see you there, guys. Okay, so moving right along. So the next question that I always get is, can I get paid from a nonprofit? Can I get paid from a nonprofit? Yes, you can. You absolutely can get paid from a nonprofit. The only difference is how the money is distributed. The only difference between how someone gets paid from a for-profit and a nonprofit is how it's distributed. So you can definitely, as a founder, you can create a position for yourself within a nonprofit. Maybe most people become the executive director. That's the typical position that people tend to want to have when they start a nonprofit. However, I always advise, figure out exactly what it is that you like doing, because if you don't really like the business side of stuff, then the executive director position might not be the best one for you. You may want to try to find someone else for that position and then put yourself in a more programming type position where you're doing more direct service or programming or something like that, if that's where you feel like you would be more valuable. Now, how you get paid, one of the fundamental differences between a for-profit and a nonprofit is how money is distributed. So when you have a nonprofit, what you have to do is create a budget. And you have to work your salary into the budget, and it has to be approved by your board. And so your salary is your salary. It's not going to change until the board decides, okay, we're going to approve a higher salary, right? That is different from a for-profit where at the end of the year, well, basically with a for-profit, you can do what you want with the money. It's your money. And if you, let's say you have $100,000 budget, right? But your company brought in $130,000. So after you've paid off all of your expenses, you have $30,000 that you can put in your pocket, or you can put in the pockets of your board, or you can give your employees a bonus. You know, you're the owner of the company, so you can do what you want with that money, with that extra money. That's not the same with a nonprofit. You have an approved budget and you have to stick with that budget. Anything over, it goes back into the nonprofit, you know, as a reserve or to expand your programming. But it's not like you can say, we're going to budget myself with a, you know, $60,000 salary. But, oh, we made so much more money. We had this big donation. We got more grants than we expected. And we got all this extra money at the end of the year. So let's distribute it to the board and put some extra money in the board's pocket. Or, you know, I'll just double my salary for next year, or give myself a bonus. You know, you just can't make those decisions willy-nilly, right? So that's really the only difference. There needs to be more justification, because you are accountable to your funders, your donors. Some donors may not be as interested in how you're spending the money, but definitely your funders are. So you have to do with the money what you said you're going to do with the money. And if you just happen to bring in extra dollars, you can't just decide, oh, we're going to divvy it up, right? So that's really the difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit. You stick to the budget, you stick to what's been approved, you stick to what's reasonable for the amount of programming activities you have going on. And you have to make sure that the primary focus of what you're doing is to further whatever cause or mission that you said that you were organized to do. So any extra money that you didn't anticipate coming in needs to go into programming or a reserve, but not your pocket. You just can't make that decision as the founder of a nonprofit. You're not an owner. There's a difference. You're not the owner of the nonprofit. You're the founder of the nonprofit. There are no owners of a nonprofit. Okay. So that's one of the reasons. So one of the things that I would like to say about that too, is that that's why I always encourage people to have a business. I think that the best way to go about having a nonprofit is to have a business and have a nonprofit version of that business. So you do have something that you can call your own business. I am all for I am an advocate of every Black family having a family business. I think all Black families should have a family business. Okay. But even if you don't have a family business, you can have a business for yourself, an individual business. But business is important because business is something that you can hand down to your children. That is something that you can give to your children. Now, you can give things related to a nonprofit to your children. You can still leave a legacy through your nonprofit, and you can develop skills and skill sets, and maybe even create some jobs for your family and things like that through the nonprofit. But it's not the same as owning it. You still don't own it. So it's very good to have a business and have a nonprofit that you can leverage both of those. Some people have business ideas that would be more suited for a nonprofit because you may be able to actually create a salary for yourself quicker as a nonprofit than trying to do it as a for-profit. So those are some of the things that I try to work through with people and get people to, start thinking through. But if you have both, that's a beautiful, that is, to me, that's the most ideal, because then you can figure out which things you want to do under your nonprofit, what things you want to do under your for-profit. And it's just a beautiful, I don't even know the word I'm looking for, but it's a beautiful situation, right? And you can leverage both to accomplish everything that you need to accomplish. It's like a win-win situation. There is nothing wrong with wanting to create a revenue for yourself through the passion that you have for a particular cause, because it's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I want to create this change in the world, but I also have expenses. So I need to create a situation where I can dedicate myself to this without having to worry about money. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. So you just have to be true to the game and know what your intentions are, right? And make sure you're always ethical with other people's money. That's a whole nother discussion we're not going to get too deep into. And that's not something that people even ask about. This is frequently asked questions. That's what we're sticking to. But yeah, if you want more in-depth conversations about your specific situation and how to go about it, I do give free consultations. I'm going to put that information down at the bottom. Let it scroll down there for a little bit. Now, the next frequently asked question can my board vote me out? Can my board vote me out? I hate this question because the answer is yes. And I hate answering yes to this because sometimes it discourages people and they get nervous, overly nervous. I have worked with some nonprofits that don't want to expand their board because they are so fearful that their board is going to take over and vote them out. And they don't want certain people on their board that maybe could be an asset because they fear, they might take over. So let me just say this. You can't go into this with fear. There are strategies, there are things that you can do to protect yourself. And we're going to talk about that. But yes, your board can vote you out. How often does that happen? I haven't seen it in the time that I've been running my business, which has been 5 years. I have helped at least 40 people start nonprofits, and some of them have started a nonprofit and didn't really do much with it. And then other people have, full-fledged ahead. they full steam ahead. You know, they are continuously, you know, continuously making impact and still going strong. So I haven't seen it, but I do know that it happens. There is one person before I even started this business that shared with me a long time ago that he had a nonprofit and his board voted him out. We have some comments. Let me show. So Naima says, I definitely agree. All families should have some type of family business, even if it's just selling slices of homemade cake or selling secondhand clothing. Yes, I agree. Even if you have a job, it doesn't mean that you can't have a business or a hustle on the side. We live in an age where all of that is possible with this age of technology. It's so easy to start a business. That doesn't mean that it's you're living. It does not necessarily have to be that it's paying all of your bills, but you definitely want to have that as a revenue stream, because nothing is guaranteed, not even your nonprofit, as this other comment is going to show. Naima also said, I have had 3 friends whose board voted them out. Wow. We need to talk, Naima. I would like to know more about that. I would definitely like to know more about that and what the circumstances were. So yes, sometimes I hate this question because I have to be real. It can happen. I don't think it happens as often as people think, and I don't think you should be paranoid about it. So we'll talk about some of the things that you can do really quickly. Wow, I really thought that I was going to struggle to get through this hour, and we're almost the hour is almost over. So some of the things that you can do is make sure that you bring people on your board that have other things to do. Okay. They're not trying to micromanage you. They're not trying to work for the organization. They're not trying to, they have like their own business, or they're running some other company, or maybe they're leading another nonprofit. Maybe they're doing work. You want people that have other things going on, right? That's number one. And people that have other things going on are also prime candidates for boards because they can bring resources to the table, right? So you want people that are involved in different industries, involved in different initiatives, and they can bring those resources right to your organization. Term limits are important. If you don't have term limits and you just keep a board member on forever, and you have 3 or 4 board members and they've been there, 10 years, they're going to become very close to one another. They're going to become very powerful within the organization. So term limits, and you want those terms to be rotating so everyone is not ending their term at the same time. So you don't have 3 board members that started at the same time and now they're ending at the same time, and then you have to get 3 new board members. So you want a rotation with your board so that you have some seasoned board members as well as some new board members with fresh ideas, right? So term limits needs to be built into your bylaws. If you have term limits, it's very hard for someone to get so engrossed in your nonprofit that they want to take over or become so or gain a lot of power or influence over the other board members, right? So term limits are definitely important, and that's something I have to coach a lot of people on, because they don't think about it. They don't think about it. You want term limits to be in your bylaws. So that's another way to guard against like a takeover. Also, you can put in your bylaws yourself as being ex officio board member. So you always have a vote as the founder, because remember, you are setting the stage. You as the founder, you're creating you and your founding team, not just you. You're creating the initial bylaws, and that's what everybody going forward has to live by. That's your laws for your organization. And so you can write yourself in as the ex officio, meaning you always have a voting power on the board as the founder of the organization. Okay. You can tell I've been watching too many YouTube videos talking about a hack. But anyway, here is a little hack that it's not going to prevent you from your board from taking over per se, but it will give you some protection. When you start your nonprofit, and this goes back to you being involved in the paperwork from beginning to end, you want your domain name. You want your domain name. You want to own that domain name. You want to own that domain name. So even if they do a takeover, they can't use, at least on the social media end and the .com end or the .org end, they can't use that name. And that's going to cause them a little bit of a problem. So it might not prevent the takeover, but it will cause them a little bit of trouble, and it will allow you to continue to use the name because you're the founder. You started this. You can then recreate the organization with that same name. You can get the name trade. You can own the trademark. Okay, so again, going back to ownership, so they can what ties your nonprofit to what ties your what makes your nonprofit what ties your nonprofit to your articles of incorporation is your I'm sorry, how can I put this? Your EIN number is really what is your EIN number is like your social security of your number for your organization, for your corporation. So they can continue to use the corporation, right, under that EIN number and continue to do that. But your branding, with what people know of your organization or your corporation, what people know of that from the outside looking in is your brand. And you can continue with your brand and just start a whole new corporation with that brand. So you want to own the brand is what I'm trying to say. Own your trademark, own the domain name. And those two things will make it very difficult for them to continue with the brand, right? So they can continue with the corporation, but they may not be able to continue with the brand, and you can recreate it. And people wouldn't, will go your direction because that's what they recognize. So that's just like a little hack, and we are about to close. So I am going to do one last question. Can my relatives serve on the board? Your relatives can definitely serve on the board. You want to have what's called a conflict of interest policy written into your bylaws. So a lot of your protection is going to come from your bylaws, right? Relatives You can have your relatives on the board, but you want to have policies around that. For instance, the voting process can become an issue. And the only reason these things are issues to begin with is really boils down to funding, okay? Because funders look, as you get more, as you become a larger organization and you're asking for larger amounts of money, that's when people become more interested in who's on your board. And the reason why they're interested in who's on your board is because your board is fiscally responsible for your corporation. So they want to know that there's fiscal responsibility there. Okay. And they want to know that your board is diverse and that it's not, and that decisions are being made in a fair, ethical manner. So if you have a lot of cousins and husband and wife teams and things like that on the board, then you might vote for things that favor your family versus what's in the best interest of the actual corporation. So that's why funders are interested in that. There's nothing, the IRS doesn't say anything about you cannot have relatives on the board, but it does give guidance on how to navigate that if you do. So one of the things that the IRS says is that you can have in your conflict of interest policy, you can have something that states when we're voting, let's say there's a husband and wife team on the board. When you're voting, maybe on both of those, the husband and the wife actually get one vote instead of two votes. Or if there is a situation where you're voting, let's say on your salary, let's say you're the executive director and your husband is on the board, then he can be excluded and they're voting for your salary. They're voting on the new budget and you want to increase your salary. So they're voting on the increase of your salary. The husband can be excluded from that vote. So these are some things that you can put into place to just make it ethical, and make sure that you're ethical in your dealings with the money aspect. It all really boils down to how you're handling the money, and you don't want people voting for things that's going to benefit them. It has to benefit the mission. So obviously, if you have a husband, if you're the executive director and your husband is on the board and he's voting for, your salary increase, of course he's going to want to vote for your salary increase because it's going to bring more money into his household, right? So that's a conflict of interest. So you want to have policies that guard against that. And as long as you have that, you're covered. You really don't have to have anything to worry about. Other than just, you don't want to be ridiculous and have everybody on your board is a family member. Everybody has the same last name, because it might raise red flags for funders. Even if you have certain things in your bylaws, it still might raise some red flags. So you don't want to be ridiculous with it. But yeah, that's the answer. You can do it. It's just there's really not a lot of things you can't do with a nonprofit. It's just how you do it. And your bylaws become very, very key in protection against a lot of things. I really want to say more. I can't believe it has already been an hour, but I would like to end by saying that the Female Solution has programming 7 days out of the week, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. And as we end this podcast, I'm going to show you a short clip of Cinnabella, who will be doing her podcast tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. The 7 a.m. folks, I'm telling you, every single morning that I get ready for work, I listen to one of the Female Solution podcasters, right? So tomorrow morning is Cinnabella. So we're going to give you a little bit commercial for her, and then also our closing. I have had a wonderful time. I feel like I didn't even say enough. We're going to have to do a part 2 of this. Please, if you're looking at the replay of this, put your questions in the comments so that next time we do a coaching session, I can answer your questions as well. Have a good evening, newbies. And I want to introduce you to Cinnabella, and then we're going to say our goodbyes.
We've come to the end of our show today. If you missed any broadcasts, go to our website for the audio and video archives at www.thefemalesolution.com. On behalf of our team of radio hosts, I'd like to thank all of you who participated in today's discussions. And to our global family joining us from all around the world, we say thank you. To our family in China, xie xie. India, dhanyavad. Japan, arigato. Korea, kamsamnida. Russia, spasiba. Germany, danke. Poland, dziękuję. France, merci. Spain, gracias. Italy, grazie. Egypt, shukran. Ghana, madasi. Nigeria, eshe. South Africa, ngiyabonga. Senegal, jareh. Kenya, asante. Israel, toda. Pakistan, shukriya. Afghanistan, tashakur. Saudi Arabia and Palestine, shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you, and may peace be upon you and the mercy of God and God's blessings.